Hi, thanks for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell. Today I want to talk about the philosopher's journey, or at least this is the journey as Plato outlined it. And I hope that you can use this as something of a roadmap to guide you through your life as a philosopher. The stages of the journey that I'm going to outline today can actually be found in Plato's Republic. I'm going to be drawing from Book 7. And Book 7 opens with the allegory of the cave. And then the last part of Book 7, from Stephanus number 537 to the end of that book, Plato gives us the stages of our journey. Now, those of you that are familiar with this dialogue know that it is written as an extended analogy of a city-state to the soul. On the surface, Socrates seems to be building a fictitious republic, and this, of course, is why many people mistake this dialogue for a political treatise. However, what is actually going on here is that Plato is challenging us to take each statement that is made about the republic and to apply it to the soul. And it really is a brilliant dialogue, one of my favorites, and I think it's a very useful exercise too, by the way. Unfortunately, though, it does make the Republic difficult to quote sometimes. So I am going to show you some quotes from this section, but I'm not going to rely on the text as heavily in this video as I have in some past videos. All right, well, here is a drawing that I found showing the allegory of the cave. I think you're probably all somewhat familiar with this allegory, where you have people chained here in the cave, and they are staring at these shadows on the wall, and they mistake the shadows for reality. However, if one of these people were to stand up and look around, he would discover that what he thought were moving bodies was actually just shadows of these objects here. And the shadows are being cast because of this fire back here. And there's a metaphysical meaning behind all of these, but it's beyond the scope of this video. I have talked about it in some past ones. So if this person were to then look around and have the insight that, maybe there is more to reality than just this physical world, he may want to leave the cave and see what is even beyond it, what is in the upper world, the real world, if you will. Now you can kind of see here there's a path here, and if this person were to walk up this path, it would lead to this part here. It's a very strenuous, difficult journey, but eventually this person could perhaps emerge out and see the world. And then there's a whole nother level of growth that is associated with adjusting to the brightness, until eventually this person can reach the pinnacle of this analogy, the one thing that is strangely missing from the drawing, the sun. Once he sees the sun and he knows what it is, now he can go back down into the cave, readjust to the darkness, and that again is another whole level of growth. So why did I run through all of this? It's because we're going to see that our journey largely corresponds to the various elements of this allegory, the various stages that this person goes through as he leaves and returns. All right, so what are the stages? Stage 1. This is our initial questioning of the nature of reality. Now, I imagine that anybody watching a video such as this one is at least at stage 1. People who just go with the flow, never question what this physical world is or what it means to be human, those are the people who are the chained prisoners. Stage 1, though, is where we first break the chains and look around. But looking around will force us not only to question what reality is, but also to question our own beliefs. And so stage 1 also involves becoming aware of the role that belief and imitation play in our lives. We're going to find that epistemology, or the study of knowledge, is quite relevant to this journey. Plato did a very clever thing in the Republic. It's broken up into 10 chapters called books, and you'll find that book 6 ends with his divided line, where he introduces the cognitive functions, and then book 7 opens with this allegory of the cave. Now, if you were to connect all the books together to take out the chapters and just connect it all as just one long book and read it straight through, you will find that there is actually no transition at all between the divided line and the allegory of the cave. The two flow together. And when we connect them, then we can start to really appreciate that epistemology and ontology are intertwined. They are indelibly intertwined. Now, for those of you not familiar with this terminology, let me back up for just a moment. So ontology, it has ontos as its root, which is the Greek word for reality or being. And of course, ology is the study of. So ontology is the study of reality or existence. And epistemology has as its root the Greek word episteme, which means knowledge. And so it is the study of knowledge or cognitive functions. And you'll find when you look at the two together, the divided line and the allegory of the cave, that he is intertwining the two. All right, what do we do at stage 1? These are our initial readings and discussions. The dialogues that are considered to be early dialogues fit nicely here. I do have a playlist, by the way, called Early Dialogues if you want to see which ones are included there. And these dialogues are in general shorter and they're left open-ended. Their role is, their function, I might say, is to get us thinking about things like what is virtue or what is the soul or how is it that we learn anything anyway. We're going to find at this stage that our ideas are highly influenced by assumptions that we never thought to question before. And so stage 1 also involves some initial questioning of assumptions. Now, as we go along and our thoughts and our discussions progress, we are gradually going to gather our thoughts into a greater unity. We're going to start to see a cohesive metaphysics unfolding and starting to come into focus. And that brings us to stage 2. Because here we are continuing to contemplate the nature of reality, but now we're doing so in a more precise way. Now we're looking to things in themselves, so the ideas, the forms, what I like to call absolute realities. And we're looking to the intelligible realm where we'll find these absolute realities. So what before had been fragmented thoughts on various topics is now coming together into a unified whole. Here's how Plato describes stage 2 in the Republic. And by the way, all of the quotes that I'm using from the Republic will come from the translator Paul Shorey. Now keep in mind here, of course, that this is said, at least on the surface, in that analogy of building a city-state. He says, they will be required to gather the studies which they disconnectedly pursued as children in their former education into a comprehensive survey of their affinities with one another and with the nature of things. So if we're going to apply this to the soul as children, might be like the early stages of our life as a philosopher, our early years in philosophy. The former education, of course, would be stage 1, and there we disconnectedly pursued various studies, but now in stage 2, we're bringing them into a comprehensive survey, and we're starting to see them as this whole, looking at a whole picture of the nature of things. Going back to the cave, this would be like that ex-prisoner in the cave climbing up the steep ascent. Now, the ascent is said to be steep, and I think this is because the sincere practitioner is likely to spend many years at stage 2 and to struggle through many difficulties. In fact, the road of understanding is actually infinite, and there's an incommensurability, if you will, between understanding and knowing between stages 2 and stage 3. You can potentially spend your whole life here at stage 2, and some people do that. But for those who do finally emerge into the sunlight of the upper world, such as this lucky guy here, you're at stage 3. And here is where dialectic really shows its strength. At this stage, we want to systematically explore reality itself and its causes. Now, along the way, we're going to find that we do still have some assumptions that remain and need to be dropped away. This is represented in the allegory by the person needing to adjust to the brightness, maybe at first looking at things only at night or shadows or reflections in water and so on. And this is because we do still have assumptions that we're going to need to drop away. There is a mistaken notion that some people have that false beliefs are only a problem in the first two stages. They imagine that we go through some kind of initial purification in stage one, and then at stage two, we're going to clear up all of our false assumptions about metaphysics. However, that's not quite accurate. What we're going to find is that knowing and ignorance can exist in the same soul. We can have knowledge about some things, but still hold some false beliefs. And so we're still going to be working through those false beliefs at every stage. We're going to go on beyond a third stage. So we're going to keep working on ourselves, and eventually, hopefully, we will reach that pinnacle of stage 3, that vision of being itself, represented by seeing the sun. Here's Plato's description of that. He says that we need to test them by the power of dialectic to see which of them is able to disregard the eyes and other senses and go on to being itself in company with truth. So many people feel justified in stopping here. Surely this is the goal. Now we've dropped all of our assumptions, right? And the experience is that the idea here is that the experience of being itself, which of course, again, depicted in the allegory as seeing the sun, is that highest goal. It's what it means to be wise, isn't it? Not for Plato. We are still going to need a fourth stage. And this is because in the Republic, Plato introduces his idea of the ideal, what he calls the philosopher king. Now, a philosopher, of course, in general, is anyone who loves wisdom, whether you're at stage 1 or one of the later stages. However, here, we're using this term philosopher king to point to that quintessential wise person. So in this context, we want to think of someone who not only contemplates reality, but has come to know it. And king is being used here in the sense of being able to function as a leader. Of course, we don't literally have to become a political leader. The polity that Socrates created in Republic would, of course, be guided by a king. But the soul that is analogous to that polity would be guided by the wisdom-loving part of the soul. And so here's my definition of a philosopher king. I would define the philosopher king as someone who is able to act in the world guided by the knowledge of the nature of reality. Here's what Socrates says about those who choose to stay in the upper world and not actually act in the world. He says they will not voluntarily engage in action, believing that while still living, they have been transported to the isles of the blessed. So he's complaining about them, that it's not enough just to have that vision that is the peak, if you will, of stage 3. You need to go into the world and function with that knowledge to make the world a better place. I mean, the world won't be better until the people in it are wiser. And if you have that wisdom, how can you not want to share it? And so that's why we need a stage 4 and the stages beyond it as well. Because it is here that we're going to integrate our insights. I'm not going to say a whole lot about what is that experience that is the peak of stage 3. What does it feel like to experience being itself? What I will say is that we can feel a real sense of disconnect after such an experience when we try to go back into the world at large. It can often feel as if the two worlds, the one represented by the cave and the one represented by the upper world, it can feel like they don't even fit together. Some people will fail to hold on to what they learned in the upper world. I feel there's like an afterglow, that's what I call it, the afterglow after such an experience, where you may feel some great connection, but eventually our energy is going to settle, and then we're going to feel that disconnect. And it can actually be very hard to hold on to what we learned in the upper world. It's really remarkably easy to get pulled back into the daily grind of life in the cave, especially if you didn't really understand what it was you experienced. And that's really why we have to go back down into the cave, because we have to understand the experience and understand its connection to our physical world. Here's what Socrates says about it. He says, send them down into the cave again, and compel them to hold commands in war and the other offices suitable to youth. They are to be tested to see whether they will remain steadfast under diverse solicitations or whether they will flinch and swerve. And so it is at stage 4 that we're learning to live in the world as someone who knows the true nature of reality. You can probably imagine that people at stage 4 will naturally make different choices and will naturally react differently to events than people who have never left the cave, who mistake the physical world for ultimate reality. I think stage 4 is a really important stage because it's here that we're learning to shift our identity from its connection to the physical world to its true essence. We may imagine that a powerful peak experience would do this automatically, but it does not. Looking at my own growth through these stages, at least so far, I would say that we are continuing to mature at stage 4. We look around and we can see lots of beauty because of the experiences we've had by this point, but we also still see there's great confusion in the world. We see the anger, the misery. People at stage 1 and 2 may feel that the world is just unjust. That's why many people have thrown away the idea of religion, saying that there can't be a God because there's so much injustice in the world. At stage 4, we do still see all of that, but we also see the beauty of the whole. And we're starting to better appreciate that there is justice in the whole. So we can see the value of and even the need for more people to break their chains, to make the same sort of journey that we are making. So the insights that we enjoy at stage 4 result from our continued contemplations of the nature of reality. We're continuing to weed out even further assumptions that we hold. We're making greater sense of what it was we experienced at stage 3. And so through all of this, our energy continues to strengthen. It continues to manifest in further insights and greater clarity of vision. If we are persistent and sincere, eventually we'll reach stage 5. Here, we are turning to the source of all that is. Plato describes this aspect of stage 5 in somewhat cryptic terms, and this is really all that he says about it in this part of the Republic. He says, "We shall require them to turn upwards the vision of their souls, and fix their gaze on that which sheds light on all." Now, what he is referring to here is what in Platonism we often call the good or the one. It's that jump beyond subject-object to the one itself, beyond all duality. I want to bring in Plotinus for a moment because I think he describes it nicely. Now, in the Republic, of course, Plato is using the language of the good. In this quote I'm going to show you from Plotinus, he's using the one instead. And he says that the soul lives another life as it advances towards the one, reaches it, and shares in it. The soul must renounce everything else and rest in the one alone, becoming it alone. Okay, so stage 5 is a very lofty stage to reach. It's not complete though. There is still another part to stage 5. Plato tells us, or Socrates, in the voice of Socrates, tells us that when they have thus beheld the good itself, they shall use it as a pattern for the right ordering of the state and the citizens and themselves throughout the remainder of their lives. So this again, of course, is written in that language of building a city-state. What we want to do here, what he's telling us, is that we want to pattern our lives in accordance with the true nature of reality. Now, just to clarify the difference between this and what I was talking about at stage 4. Stage 4 was where we were connecting a lot of the dots. We were closing the gap between our insights and how we actually feel and identify in the world. But stage 5 is a more mature stage where we are now manifesting our own unique version of the philosopher king. Our soul is finally blooming, if you will. And this stage, like the others, admits of infinite growth. And so this could be the end of the line, and yet, in a sense, we can also see one further step in our growth. There's a sense in which we can see this stage here. When the turn comes for each, we toil in the service of the states and hold office for the city-state sake. Each generation educates others like themselves. And so we can also talk about a sixth stage where we become a guide to others. You might think of this as paying forward on your education, because that is the point of going back down into the cave again, to make the world a better place. Plato hints at this when his fictitious prisoner is first freed from his chains and looks bewildered around the cave. And Socrates asks this: what do you suppose would be his answer if someone told him that what he had seen before was all a cheat and an illusion, but that now, being nearer to reality and turned toward real things, he saw more truly? And so we have to ask ourselves, who is this mysterious someone? Here's another example. And if our mysterious someone should drag him thence by force up the ascent, which is rough and steep, and not let him go before he had drawn him into the light of the sun, and it goes on from there. So here again we see this person who is functioning as a guide. It sounds a lot like Socrates, doesn't it? And so there is your guide, toiling in the service of the state, as that previous quote put it. So here are our 6 stages then. The initial stage of breaking our chains is that initial questioning of the nature of reality. We then start on that path to lead us out of the cave, where we are unifying our philosophical studies. In the upper world, we dialectically explore the absolute realities. We then can go back down into the cave to integrate our insights. Eventually, we turn to the source of all that is, and then perhaps we become a guide to others. Perhaps those of you later in the journey can see the steps that you've traveled, at least in broad strokes here. For those of you earlier in the journey, this can serve as something of a roadmap to see where you're going. I hope you found that helpful, and as always, if you did, I would appreciate you hitting the like button, and also please think about subscribing if you don't already. If you have any questions or comments, I always love to see your comments or your questions. You can leave those below. There's also an email address in the description box. Thank you very much.